Hi, my name is Jad Sori. This presentation will cover the summer research that I did from May 2017 to August 2017. It was made possible by an award by the McGill University and their donors. The title is The Impact on Antarctic Sea Ice of Oceanic Mesoscale Eddies. Antarctic sea ice extent has steadily been increasing over the last 36 years of the satellite record, in direct contrast with the sea ice cover of the Arctic. It's very surprising since the world is mostly warming due to climate change. We can see here a map of the sea ice concentration gathered from satellite observation. While the trend is not homogeneous, the total sea ice definitely increases south of the Antarctic circumpolar current. There are currently many hypotheses that try to explain this phenomenon. These can be broadly separated in two categories. There are the ones caused by natural variability, like polynyas, which I will cover later. There are also the ones caused by greenhouse forcing. Also unexplained at present is that all models differ from observations for Antarctic sea ice. These figures show the average sea ice concentration for 38 models. The difference with observation is striking. We observe a decrease in sea ice for the whole region. The cause of this disagreement could be that the natural variability of the observed system is stronger than the anthropogenic forcing, or that the model's response to climate change is too strong. Over the last 30 years, the scientific community has observed a strengthening and a poleward shift of the westerlies. The westerlies are actually the most influential winds in the Southern Ocean. A study links an increase in westerly winds to the delayed warming mechanism. This mechanism involves a two-step response. First, there is an increase in Ekman advection. This means that the surface ocean diverges away from the pole, which causes cooling farther away from the continent and more sea ice. The slow but persisting response is a decrease in sea ice caused by upwelling of warmer water from the depth. Mesoscale eddies have been found to be responsible for the long-term effect of delayed warming. Mesoscale eddies are 10 to 100 kilometers large and are often qualified as the weather of the ocean, playing the roles of cyclones and anticyclones in the atmosphere. A study by Screen et al. Shows that models which do not resolve eddies will only show the short-term surface cooling effect. The purpose of this study is to assess the impact of mesoscale eddies on the response of sea ice to climate change in the context of the delayed warming mechanism, which has not been done before. I will now talk about the method and the datasets used for this project. We have studied two different variables, that of the sea ice concentration and extent, and the sea surface temperature. The sea ice concentration represents the fraction of each grid cell that contains sea ice. It is measured between 0 and 1. The sea ice extent area, measured in kilometers squared, can then be calculated from the sea ice concentration, with a threshold of 15%. The simulations used are part of a suite of coupled climate models from the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. They include ocean, land, atmosphere, and sea ice. The difference between the three versions used is the ocean resolution. This is the lowest resolution model at 1 degree, and it is also the only one which is parameterized. CM 2.5 and CM 2.6 both resolve eddies, but with different accuracy. The figures shown here are of the dynamic sea level, which is directly related to the energy of the ocean. This is a satellite observation. This is a CM2 1 degree model, and this one is CM 2.6. CM 2.6 is much closer to reality. Each version of the models has two different experiments available. The control experiment can be likened to the natural variability of the system. The CO2 concentration is kept constant at a pre-industrial level. The sensitivity experiment is an idealized climate change scenario where the CO2 concentration trend is 1% per year. It comprises both the natural variability and the forced response of the system. Between the two lines that we can see on this graph, here and here, is the period that was closest to the observation period. We determined this by looking at the CO2 concentration for the first year of observation that we have for sea ice. Now I will present the results of our project. First of all, we validate the models compared to observation. This figure shows the seasonal variability of the sea ice extent area for both observation and models. Both models and observation have their lowest point in February and their highest in winter, so September or October. Models and observations differ slightly, especially in winter, but the cycle is similar enough that the models can be considered reasonable. The maps shown are of the sea surface temperature averaged over the whole period. Again, the models look fairly reasonable compared to observation. An interesting feature in CM 2.6 can be found in the Weddell Sea, and that is clear evidence that polynyas are resolved by this model. Polynyas are regions that are free of sea ice in the middle of the sea ice cover. They form by upwelling of warm water which melts the ice. Polynyas may last many years and are very rare. We can identify 2 in the CM 2.6 time series, but none in the other models. This figure is the sea ice extent average annually for observation and models, so 1 point per year. A linear regression is calculated for each dataset. The most obvious result is that sea ice extent area for observation tend to increase, while all models predict a decrease. Also, CM 2.5 and 2.6 have a very similar trend, slightly differing for CM to 1 degree, which does not decrease as much. However, it is also clear that natural variability plays an important role, especially for CM 2.6, which is greatly influenced by the cycle of polynyas. It is possible that the difference between observations and models comes from a natural variability that is desynchronized. Indeed, if we resolve polynyas, we can obtain a positive trend like that of observation. We can now also clearly see both polynyas here and here. To produce these figures, we calculated the slope of the linear regression over time at each point of the map. We also subtracted the control from the sensitivity experiment to analyze purely the response to climate change. The hashes point out trends that are not significant. We can see that overall sea ice concentration tends to decrease, while sea surface temperature has very homogeneous increasing trends. CM to 1 degrees sea ice decreases less than CM 2.5 and CM 2.6, as seen by their darker blue color and as confirmed by the average decrease per decade. We can see the same area of increased sea surface temperature warming in all 3 models along the western boundary current. However, we can still see more of a warming effect as resolution increases when we look at the average per decade. We can clearly see in CM to 1 degree that areas of increase in sea ice corresponds to the small areas of decrease of sea surface temperature, although those trends are not significant. To conclude, at first glance, models definitely do not agree with observation, both for sea surface temperature and sea ice. We see overall a typical response for global warming. A possible cause would be a desynchronized natural variability. We have seen that the CM 2.6 model does present positive sea ice trends in the recovery period between 2 polynyas. At the beginning of the satellite record, the Antarctic was going through a polynya, so it is possible that we are currently in such a recovery period. However, the models might also predict too much of a greenhouse forcing that overwhelms natural variability. As for the role of eddies in the response of sea ice, we can see a clear trend linking a better resolution of eddies to a stronger warming response, leading to less sea ice. Considering the study by Screen et al. Linking eddy resolution and the long-term warming effect of the delayed warming mechanism, It is possible that the models are in fact accurate, but only for predicting the long-term effects of greenhouse forcing. To go further on this project, it would be interesting to look at both the atmospheric temperature and the sea ice budget. I have briefly looked at the atmospheric temperature and I've already seen the effect of polynyas for CM2.6, so it's bound to be an interesting avenue of research. The sea ice budget could give insight into what mechanisms are responsible for the decrease in sea ice observed, and I believe it could possibly provide additional answer. Thank you for listening and have a good day.